Much like Game of Thrones, Vikings is a show that was at its highest point during the opening 3 seasons. After this point, Vikings slowly starts to wane in quality. However, in that time Vikings manages to deliver some unforgettable moments. Whether it be the Paris siege or Floki's wild eccentricity, this show matched Thrones blow for blow at its highest heights. If you've finished this one and are looking for something similar, we've combed through the archives and saved you the hassle with our top 10 picks for alternate viewing. To keep things simple for skim readers, we've added what similarities these have. Of course, for all the shows we've reviewed, we've also added a handy link so you can check out our full thoughts on that series and see if it's something you want to invest your time with. So without further ado, we present 10 TV shows that should whet the appetite when you finish streaming Vikings. If you swap out the fantasy setting of Game of Thrones for pirates and high seas shenanigans, it wouldn't be far removed from what Black Sails achieves. Split across 4 seasons, this seafaring venture captures the essence of piracy beautifully, and does so with some impressive visuals and an expansive story. Instead of the over-the-top swashbuckling Jack Sparrows of the world, Black Sails examines the true nature of piracy through an eclectic group of characters. The action is gritty and violent too, and it's definitely worth persevering through the slower first season. From there on out, this show really comes into its own. Set during the time of the Viking invasions of Britain, The Last Kingdom is a well-written, brutally realistic series relying on the charisma of its many characters to drive the story of Uhtred Ragnarsson forward. The time period is perfectly captured in both atmosphere and set design too. If that wasn't enough, the story draws from the rich history of Britain across 4 epic seasons of entertainment. With a 5th season already greenlit, this is one of the better choices to check out when you're done with Barbarians. Clocking in at a whopping 95 episodes, 3 Kingdoms is nothing short of epic. This ambitious project adapts Luo Guanzhong's classical Chinese novel Romance of the 3 Kingdoms and includes all the rivalries, intrigues, and wars of the late Eastern Han Dynasty. If you're in the mood for something that'll take up a good chunk of your time, this one is definitely worth considering. The show is beautifully written and features a great balance of action, character-driven subplots, and plenty of twists and turns along the way. The Witcher is not without its flaws, but it's hard to discredit what a satisfying and well-written slice of high fantasy this is. There's certainly enough magic, monsters, and sword fighting to keep things rooted in danger, while doing the video game it's based on justice. For those unaware, the story here revolves around a monster hunter named Geralt. Vilified by humankind, these white-haired, emotionless witchers spend their time hunting creatures and getting paid to do so. Geralt is joined on this hunt by Ciri, a princess in a neighboring city, and a mage in training named Yennefer. Across this first season, the show balances investigative work with monster slaying really well, which should satisfy those looking to scratch that high fantasy itch. There's a reason Rome is regarded as one of the best historical TV shows HBO has ever produced. Alongside Band of Brothers, Rome is an incredible feat on the small screen. The series was actually originally intended to be a mini-series too, but was later expanded and turned into a visual and storytelling treat to behold. Set during the 1st century BC, the story follows the lives of 2 men serving in the Roman army, Lucius Vorenus and Titus Poio. There's no shying away from the brutal, harsh realities of their profession, and Rome captures this in all its bloody glory. And this glory is backed up by stunning visuals and some of the best production work one could ask for from a historical epic like this. Rome is essential viewing, and despite its disappointing ending after a 2nd season, remains a quintessential choice for any historical drama fan. Spartacus is a bloody, brutal series revolving around Roman gladiators. Specifically, the series zones in on Spartacus, who happens to be a warrior orchestrating a rebellion against the Romans. Early on, you'd be forgiven for writing this one off, especially with the gratuitous nudity and blood-soaked violence. However, this series soon evolves into a more compelling story over time, boasting 3 seasons of exciting, action-packed drama. Oh, and on a side note, the season finale is suitably epic too, rewarding your time with a satisfying conclusion. Marco Polo's gorgeous cinematography and keen eye for visuals make it a very good-looking series indeed. The sweeping vistas of 13th century Mongolia are breathtakingly beautiful, and really make you feel like you've transported to that time period. The story follows the exploits of the Mongolian army, led by the ruthless Kublai Khan, as he wrestles for power against the Chinese army. Caught up in the middle of this is explorer Marco Polo, who becomes entangled in the court of Kublai Khan and, consequently, part of the conflict between the Chinese and Mongolians. The story dances between both factions but remains an enthralling watch despite some sluggish pacing at times. Sadly, Marco Polo was another Netflix casualty, cancelled after its second season. However, it remains a show well worth checking out. Set in the Canadian port town of Fort James and the surrounding wilderness, Frontier revolves around rival factions fighting for control over the lucrative fur trade. At the center of this conflict is Declan Harp, a half-Irish/half-Cree native Canadian outlaw who does his best to try and topple the monopoly being held over the aforementioned fur. While the first season is a little rusty, the later chapters definitely improve, concluding things with an explosive third season that bows this show out on a high. Jason Momoa is inspired in this role too, managing to put on a great performance throughout. It may not be the best period drama out there, but it is a highly enjoyable one nonetheless. Set in the heart of Florence during the early 15th century, Medici, Masters of Florence is a beautifully shot, engrossing historical drama. Split across 3 seasons, this dramatic recreation of the Medici family begins with a growing conflict between Rinaldo Albizzi and Cosimo. This conflict drives much of the narrative forward, eventually coming to a head late on during the show's climactic finale. From here, the next couple of seasons expand the story and history of the Medici family, delivering a compelling series worth checking out. Set 100 years after the events of Amazon's Vikings series, Vikings Valhalla is a bold, brutal and bloody period drama. Beginning with the St. Brice's Day massacre and ending with the fate of both England and Scandinavia hanging in the balance, Valhalla handles a decent chunk of history and it tackles that pretty well. Much like Vikings, the real history surrounding this period of time is somewhat skewed. Vikings Valhalla is a really solid watch, and although it does have a few narrative bumps in the road, it's largely a satisfying and enjoyable show to sit through. So there we have it, our 10 TV show alternatives to watch when you're finished with Vikings on Amazon Prime Video. What do you think of our picks? Do you agree? Are there any notable omissions? Let us know in the comments below.